Miguel Hernandez had spent the last 10 years cleaning the sprawling corridors of the Golden Plaza Mall in Mexico City. For him, life had been a repetitive loop of mopping floors, clearing trash, and working night shifts to keep the glitzy shopping center pristine for the rich and influential. Despite his modest life, Miguel's sharp mind and keen observation set him apart from his fellow workers. While others focused on their tasks, Miguel noticed things, patterns, odd behaviors, and secrets hidden in plain sight. It was during one of these quiet night shifts that Miguel stumbled upon something unusual. As he cleaned the lower basement, far from the bustling shops and cafes above, he noticed a peculiar door at the far end of a long, dimly lit hallway. The door, reinforced with steel and secured with an advanced locking system, seemed out of place in a storage area meant for cleaning supplies and maintenance tools. What caught his attention most was the subtle activity around it, high-ranking mall executives entering late at night, always in pairs, and never staying long. At first, Miguel dismissed the door as none of his business. But as weeks passed, his curiosity grew. What could be so important in a basement that only a select few had access to? Why was it guarded by what appeared to be top-of-the-line security systems? The questions nagged at him, and his imagination began to wander. One night, while emptying trash nearby, Miguel noticed muffled voices and the faint sound of something metallic clinking from behind the door. It wasn't just a storage room. Something important, possibly illegal, was hidden there. Miguel couldn't shake the feeling that this door held an opportunity, perhaps the kind he had dreamed of his entire life. Living paycheck to paycheck in a cramped one-bedroom apartment with his wife and 2 kids, he often fantasized about a better life. He worked long hours, but could never get ahead. Now, standing in that dimly lit basement, staring at the mysterious door, an idea began to form in his mind. One night, after the mall had closed and the staff had gone home, Miguel lingered in the basement, pretending to finish his work. As the minutes ticked by, the mall fell silent, save for the occasional hum of an air conditioner. With a flashlight in hand, Miguel approached the steel door. His heart raced as he inspected the biometric scanner and keycard system. It was sophisticated, the kind of security you'd expect at a bank, not a shopping mall. Whatever was behind this door wasn't ordinary. Over the next few weeks, Miguel became obsessed with the door. He observed the executives more closely, noticing that they always carried identical black briefcases when entering and exiting the room. His suspicions deepened when he overheard snippets of their conversations. Terms like cleaning the books and transfers made it clear this wasn't just a storage room. The door led to something far more valuable, a private vault hidden in the heart of the mall. The discovery felt surreal. Miguel realized the vault wasn't just a secret, it was a stash for illegal cash. Rumors among some of the workers hinted that the mall's top brass were laundering money for wealthy criminals, using the vault as their hideout for millions of undeclared pesos. It all started to make sense. This wasn't just a place of business, it was a hub for corruption, greed, and crime. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, Miguel faced an internal battle. He could walk away, pretend he had never noticed the vault, and continue his life of scraping by. But the thought of all that money, just sitting there, was intoxicating. What if he could take a piece of it? What if he could finally give his family the life they deserved? The idea scared him, but it also excited him. Miguel knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above his circumstances. The temptation grew stronger with each passing day. Miguel began researching the security systems, using his phone to watch videos on biometric locks and keycard hacks. At first, it felt like a game, something to pass the time. But deep down, he knew he was preparing for something bigger. The idea of breaking into the vault became an obsession. Miguel couldn't stop thinking about it. He wasn't a criminal, but for the first time in his life, he wondered if he could be one. Standing in the quiet basement one evening, Miguel clenched his fists. The vault wasn't just a locked door, it was a door to a new life. He would either walk through it or spend the rest of his life cleaning floors, haunted by the question of what could have been done before diving deeper into this thrilling story. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more gripping tales of ambition, heists, and untold secrets. Let's continue. Miguel Hernandez couldn't shake the thought of the vault he'd discovered in the mall's basement. The idea of all that money hidden just behind a steel door consumed him. Night after night, while working his janitorial shifts, he studied every movement around the area, noting the routines of the mall executives and security staff. His curiosity had turned into obsession, and now it was evolving into something dangerous, a plan. Miguel knew he couldn't do this alone. He reached out to Carlos Ortega, a former locksmith with a reputation for bending the rules. Carlos initially dismissed Miguel's idea as reckless, but the lure of millions of dollars hidden in an untraceable vault changed his mind. Together, they began to strategize. The first step was figuring out how to breach the vault's complex security system. Miguel had observed executives using a black keycard to gain access, but it was paired with a biometric scanner. Carlos explained that they would need to clone the keycard and bypass the fingerprint lock, a tall order, but not impossible. Miguel's janitorial duties gave him the perfect cover to gather intel. One evening, he deliberately spilled water near the executive lounge. While cleaning up the mess, he saw an opportunity. An executive left their keycard on the desk. Acting quickly, Miguel swiped it and handed it to Carlos, who cloned it in minutes before Miguel returned it to its original spot. Next came the biometric scanner. Carlos crafted a simple but effective dummy fingerprint using gelatin and glue. Miguel discreetly pressed a piece of tape on the scanner while cleaning it, lifting the fingerprint they needed. With the keycard cloned and the dummy fingerprint ready, they were halfway to their goal. The final hurdle was the mall's surveillance system. Miguel had spent weeks observing the security cameras, identifying a blind spot in the basement's coverage. Carlos suggested a power cut to the area during the heist, creating just enough confusion to cover their tracks. They rehearsed every move, ensuring there were no gaps in their plan. As the holiday weekend approached, the perfect time to strike with the mall closed for renovations, Miguel's nerves began to fray. The stakes were enormous, but the thought of finally breaking free from his struggles kept him focused. Carlos' words echoed in his mind. "This is our shot, Miguel. If we pull this off, we're free." The night before the heist, Miguel stood outside the vault door, his heart racing. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow, everything changes." For better or worse, he knew there was no turning back. The long-anticipated night had arrived. The Golden Plaza Mall was eerily quiet, closed for a 3-day holiday renovation. For Miguel and Carlos, this was their best chance. Months of planning had led to this moment, and there was no room for mistakes. Miguel arrived at the mall under the guise of an overtime shift, a common occurrence for him. Carlos, posing as a contracted maintenance worker, was already inside, dressed in overalls and carrying a toolbox that concealed their equipment. They exchanged a brief nod before heading to the basement. With practiced efficiency, Miguel disabled the nearby security cameras by cutting power to the basement grid. Carlos worked quickly to override the keycard lock, using the cloned card they had prepared weeks earlier. The door's indicator light turned green. The two entered the vault room, and Miguel's breath caught in his throat. The vault door loomed before them, massive, steel, and heavily reinforced. This was the final barrier between them and the $12 million they had dreamt about. Carlos placed the dummy fingerprint on the scanner and pressed it firmly. The scanner beeped, and for a moment, nothing happened. Miguel's heart pounded in his chest. Then, with a loud hiss, the vault door began to unlock. Inside, the sight was breathtaking. Bundles of cash stacked high, gold bars glinting under the dim light, and small crates filled with luxury watches and diamonds. Miguel stared in awe, realizing the scale of what they had uncovered. "Let's move," Carlos said sharply, snapping Miguel out of his trance. They began filling large black garbage bags with as much as they could carry. Miguel worked quickly, his hands shaking from a mix of adrenaline and fear. Carlos, ever the professional, kept an eye on his watch. 10 minutes, Carlos warned. As they zipped up the last bag, Miguel caught sight of a folder labeled "Confidential." Without thinking, he grabbed it and shoved it into one of the bags. Carlos shot him a questioning look, but there was no time to argue. The escape went smoother than either had anticipated. Disguised as janitors carrying out trash, they pushed their loot on carts through the service elevator and out to the loading dock. The night guards barely glanced at them as they exited the building. Once outside, they loaded the bags into a waiting van and drove off into the night. For the first time, Miguel allowed himself to smile. They had done it. A wave of euphoria swept over Miguel as he sat in his tiny apartment, staring at the stacks of cash piled on his dining table. For a man who had spent his entire life scraping by, the sight was surreal. Carlos, ever cautious, insisted on splitting the money immediately. Miguel took his share, just over $6 million, and hid it in various places around his home. But the thrill of the heist was quickly replaced by paranoia. The next morning, news of the theft broke across every major channel. $12 million stolen from Golden Plaza Mall vault screamed the headlines. The police suspected an inside job, and the mall executives were in a panic, knowing their illegal stash had been exposed. Miguel tried to keep a low profile, continuing to work his shifts as if nothing had happened. But his sudden bursts of spending, a new car, expensive clothes, and plans for a bigger home began to raise eyebrows in his neighborhood. Carlos, on the other hand, vanished. He stopped answering Miguel's calls and went completely off the grid. Miguel couldn't decide if Carlos had betrayed him or if he was simply lying low. Meanwhile, the mall executives hired private investigators to recover the stolen money. These weren't ordinary investigators. They were men who operated outside the law. Miguel started noticing strange cars parked near his home and unfamiliar faces lingering around the mall. The folder Miguel had taken from the vault turned out to contain incriminating documents linking the executives to money laundering and illegal trade. Realizing the value of what he had, Miguel debated using the information to bargain for his safety. But doing so would expose him and risk everything. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. Miguel knew he couldn't stay in Mexico City much longer. The walls were closing in, and his once promising future now felt like a ticking time bomb. Miguel decided it was time to disappear. Using some of the stolen money, he purchased fake passports for himself and his family. The plan was simple: flee to a country where extradition would be nearly impossible and start fresh. The night before their planned departure, Miguel's worst fears came true. As he returned home from his shift, he saw a black SUV parked outside his apartment. His heart sank. Someone was waiting for him. Thinking quickly, Miguel circled back and called his wife, instructing her to pack their bags and meet him at a prearranged location. He spent the next few hours evading the men tailing him, using side streets and crowded areas to lose them. By the time he reached the rendezvous point, his family was waiting. They boarded a bus to a nearby town, where a contact of Carlos had arranged for a private car to take them across the border. As they crossed into the neighboring country, Miguel allowed himself a moment of relief. They had made it out, barely. But the story doesn't end there. Miguel's actions had left a trail of chaos behind him. The mall executives, furious at their losses, continued their hunt for him. Law enforcement, now aware of the money laundering scheme, launched a full-scale investigation into the mall's operations. Miguel and his family settled in a small coastal town under assumed names. For a while, they lived quietly, but the paranoia never left him. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar face, sent his heart racing. One day, while sitting on the beach, Miguel reflected on the choices that had brought him here. He had gained wealth beyond his wildest dreams, but at the cost of his peace and safety.